It's pretty amazing when you think about it, that silent, vigilant guardian inside you. We call it the immune system, and it's this incredibly complex defense force, constantly figuring out what belongs to you, what's self, and what doesn't. But what happens when that guardian gets it wrong? Or when we ask it to do the unthinkable, accept a life-saving intruder? Okay, let's dive in.
More than 100 years ago, a pioneering immunologist named Paul Ehrlich came up with this really dramatic term, horror autotoxicus. It literally means the horror of self-toxicity. And it describes the immune system's terrifying potential for injury to self, this built-in ability to self-destruct. That one phrase just perfectly captures the delicate balance our bodies are trying to maintain every single second.
So in this explainer, we're going to walk through that delicate balance. First up, we'll talk about the immune system's main job. Then we'll see what happens when its defenses fail. After that, we'll look at when it turns on itself. Then we'll get into the ultimate challenge of transplantation, and finally, the really strange case of a transplant that actually fights back.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, with the absolute foundation. Your immune system isn't just a random collection of cells. No, it's a masterpiece of biological engineering, and it's built for one incredibly complicated job, telling friend from foe. And that ability, to tell what's you from what's an invader, that's the absolute bedrock of our health. It does this with amazing precision day in and day out, but it's also the exact point where all the trouble starts, when the system, for whatever reason, makes a mistake.
So what happens when that core function goes sideways? Well, first, let's look at what happens when the guardian is weakened, when the body's fortress has a breach. This state is what we call immunodeficiency. At its core, immunodeficiency just means your body's defense system isn't working like it should. Think of your immune system as a fortress. In this case, a key part of that fortress is broken or missing, and that leaves the body wide open to a constant barrage of infections that a healthy system would just brush off. Now, this weakness can come from two different places. We split them into primary and secondary. Primary immunodeficiencies are basically a flawed blueprint. It's a genetic defect you're born with. Secondary immunodeficiencies, on the other hand, are acquired. That means you had a normal immune system, but then something happened, an external factor, that caused it to weaken. So if the problem is baked into the system's design from day one, where exactly can those flaws happen? Let's take a quick look at the major categories of these primary or built-in deficiencies. So these blueprint flaws can pop up in a few key places. For instance, you can have a defect in your B cells, and that messes up your ability to make antibodies. Or the problem could be with your T cells, which are kind of like the generals of the immune army. The issue could even be in the support systems, like complement proteins or phagocytes. Those are the cells that literally go around eating invaders. Each of these defects creates its own specific set of problems. But honestly, it's the secondary or acquired deficiencies that are way more common. This is where a perfectly good immune system gets damaged, and the causes are all over the map. It could be an infection like HIV that directly attacks immune cells, it could be severe malnutrition, or it could even be the side effect of life-saving treatments like chemotherapy, which just can't avoid harming the immune system. All right, so we've talked about a system that's too weak. Now, let's flip the script completely. What happens when the system isn't weak, but is dangerously misguided? This is autoimmunity, where the guardian turns on the very body it's supposed to be protecting. Autoimmunity is a total breakdown of what we call self-tolerance. For reasons we're still figuring out, the immune system starts making antibodies and activating T cells that are targeted against its own healthy tissues. It's a genuine betrayal from within. One of the most fascinating ways this can get started is through a process called molecular mimicry. You can think of it like a case of mistaken identity, but on a microscopic scale. A foreign bug gets in, and it just so happens to have parts that look almost identical to our own cells. And the immune system gets confused. Let's walk through this. A perfect example is rheumatic fever. It all starts with a simple strep throat infection. Your body, doing its job, makes antibodies to fight off the strep bacteria. But, and this is the problem, some proteins on that bacteria look a lot like proteins in your heart valves. The antibodies can't tell the difference, so they cross-react and attack the heart, which can cause really serious long-term damage. Now, not all autoimmune diseases are the same. We generally group them by how widespread the attack is. In organ-specific diseases, the immune system has one target. Take type 1 diabetes. The T cells specifically go after and destroy the insulin-making cells in the pancreas. But in systemic diseases, like lupus, the attack is everywhere.
Autoantibodies target stuff found in almost every tissue in the body: skin, joints, kidneys, even the brain. And this brings us to a true medical marvel that is also the ultimate immunological test: transplantation. In this case, we're not just dealing with a system that's gone haywire. We are deliberately putting something foreign into the body to save a life. So the challenge here really depends on where the new organ or tissue comes from. An autograft from your own body is no problem at all. An isograft from an identical twin is pretty much a perfect match. The real trouble starts with an allograft, a transplant between two different people. And the biggest challenge of all, a xenograft, which means crossing the species barrier. And here's the central paradox of it all. We're giving the body this life-saving gift, but its most basic fundamental programming is screaming at it to attack and destroy this foreign tissue. So what's really driving that powerful rejection? At the end of the day, rejection is all about recognition. Your cells are coded in these special molecules called human leukocyte antigens, or HLA. The best way to think about them is as a unique genetic fingerprint that basically shouts, "I belong here." When your T cells bump into an organ with a different HLA fingerprint, they immediately sound the alarm and launch an attack. And this attack, this rejection, it doesn't always happen at the same speed. Hyperacute rejection is catastrophic. It happens within minutes or hours because of antibodies that were already there. Acute rejection is the most common kind, playing out over days to weeks as the T cells get organized. And then there's chronic rejection, which is the slow, grinding process that damages the organ over months or even years. And that brings us to our final and maybe most fascinating twist. So far, we've only talked about the host's body rejecting the graft. But what happens if the graft itself is a functioning immune system? In a bizarre reversal, the graft can actually start attacking the host. This is called graft versus host reaction, or GVHR. It's a total flip of the usual situation, and it's a huge deal in things like bone marrow transplants. What's happening is the new donated immune cells see the recipient's entire body as foreign and just launch a full-scale, widespread attack.
For this to happen, you need what is basically a perfect storm. 3 specific conditions have to be met. First, the graft itself has to contain active, ready-to-go T cells from the donor. Second, those T cells have to recognize the host body as foreign. And third, and this is key, the host's own immune system has to be too weak to stop them. When all 3 of those things line up, the new immune system goes on the offensive.
So, from a faulty defense to a misguided attack, and finally to intentionally introducing the other, our journey really shows the incredible power and also the fragility of the immune system. And it all leaves us with this one profound question. As our medical powers grow, what are the ultimate limits, both biologically and ethically, to our ability to redefine what it truly means to be self?